You're listening to Panthers on Tap. I'm Curtis Rauen, joined by Bryson Karbley. We're just two fans sharing our love for the game in Carolina Panthers football. So join us, crack open a cold one, some bubbly, a little wine, some scotch. We don't care, whatever makes you sleep better at night. Before we dive into the episode, a little self-promotion. Stop what you're doing. Go give us a follow on Twitter at Panthers on Tap. Join the discussion on our Facebook group. We have over 2,500 members. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcast. Just search Panthers on Tap. We are approaching the end of day 2 of the NFL free agency. And Bryson, to say the least, this is a very different team 48 hours ago.
Yeah, you could say they've improved in some areas and maybe not so much in others. But yeah, I mean, it's been exciting to have Carolina involved in the legal tampering period, and then first and second day of free agency. But before we get started, I just wanted to give you a shout out. How about those Duke Blue Devils?
Oh boy,
you knew it was coming.
Yeah, I texted you, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. They just seem they can never catch their footing, and they've struggled. That UNC game, and then tonight's just brutal. Yeah. But I'm holding on to those Badgers winning today. So I hope both those teams will probably be out in 1 or 2 games within the tournament, but we'll see what happens. But let's get into it because we got a lot to talk about tonight. Mm-hmm. And we're going to start with the big one right off the top, because this has been really a topic for more than a year now. With, you guys know who, Mr. Brian Burns. So let's talk about it here. So this is the trade. It came down, I want to say, was it Tuesday? Or was it Wednesday? I think it was Tuesday, right?
I think it was Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah. So we get the trade. This is what it's looking like right now. You get the Panthers receiving pick 39, which is the second rounder, pick 142. And actually, I think that's 141. So that might be a typo. That's a 5th round pick. And then the 2025 5th rounder. And then the Giants obviously got Brian Burns. They locked him up. Those numbers have changed, so disregard the graphic. I believe it was 141, 5-year, 141 million. Those numbers did change within the last day since I updated this graphic. And then pick number 166. So basically the Panthers and the Giants swapped 5th rounders. Panthers got a better 5th round pick this year, which is good. Bryson, your thoughts on Burns no longer a Panther, and your thoughts on the trade itself?
Yeah, I think just a couple episodes ago we were talking about, what we would like to see happen. And, I was like, I would just want it to be done before training camp. And they got it done well before training camp. I don't think it was the result I wanted specifically. I was always hard on Brian Burns, but I respected him as a player, and I undoubtedly knew that he was one of the best defensive linemen on this team, and his ceiling was to be the best defensive player on this team. I always thought Derek Brown was a better player, especially last season, but Burns' ceiling is ridiculous. And, getting him help, maybe opposite of him, could have helped him this past year. But, I think for the fans to be connected to players year after year, we go through trading CMC, even going back to cutting Cam Newton back in the Matt Rule days. It's just the fans get attached to their own homegrown players that they draft and that are first-round hits. And then to trade them for a 5th and a 2nd a year and a half after you're offered 2 firsts and a 2nd. I mean, that's just Carolina Panthers. That's the Carolina Panthers way right there. They're showing no competence whatsoever. I understand it was a different front office, so it's hard to tell how much blame you can put on Dan Morgan, but it just looks bad. We all see the media talking about the Carolina Panthers. Nobody knows what they're doing. I feel like Dan Morgan was in a hard place, trying to get a deal done. He did get that $30 million a year deal. It looks like that's what he wanted. So I do tend to agree with they offered him the $27 million and he said no. So I'm sure he's happy in New York. He got his deal. He's gonna be on a great defensive line. If New York can get a quarterback, they're gonna be a really good team. So, of course, I'm gonna miss him in Carolina. I'm gonna miss his plays that he made that were so exciting throughout the year. But Carolina turned that loss into a couple other investments that we're going to get into later, and it is what it is at this point. And getting that second is important to continue to build this team. I would have loved a first, but second's better than nothing. They got their first pick in the second round. At least it wasn't the later pick in the second round. So yeah, I mean, to sum it up, Brian Burns is going to be missed. This defense is going to miss him. He commanded so much attention on the defense at all times. Offenses had to game plan around him week in and week out. So they're gonna have some big shoes to fill in Carolina for Brian Burns' spot, and let's hope they can get it done.
Yeah, I'm glad we recorded this episode a couple days later because I was fuming when this came down. If you looked at our Twitter at all, and I will stand on record, I think they will regret this trade in the long run. And going off the contract details, and I apologize because our graphic is wrong because I didn't update it since he's actually getting $28 million average a year. So I don't buy that the Panthers offer him 27 because if they were only $1 million off, that's fucking ridiculous. It was a 5-year 141.
Okay.
So the average with that's 28.2. He gets $30 million. It
might have been that guaranteed money that they disagreed on.
Yeah, and I think that's what it was. But I think Brian Burns is one of the best pass rushers Carolina's ever had.
Yeah.
And I find it funny when people love to throw the 8 sacks last year, but they fail to mention the year prior he had 12 and a half. They also fail to bring up he was ranked 6th in pass rush win rate this past season. They also fail to mention he was on the team that never held a lead going into the fourth quarter ever in a fucking single game, never led in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And teams that were playing them were obviously up and they weren't throwing the ball and they were running out the clock. People also fail to mention 3 out of the 4 seasons Brian Burns was a pivotal starter. I'm disregarding his first year at Ron Rivera because the guy was a fucking gunner on special teams.
Yeah,
Ron Rivera didn't know what the hell he was doing. But 3 out of the 4 seasons, Brian Burns was featured as the starter on the edge. He had Stephen Weatherly, YGM, and Marquise Haynes opposite him. All fucking bums except for YGM this past season. All terrible. So when people want to throw out the numbers, you got to look a little bit deeper. And I think people are going to realize he's going to be a lot harder to replace than you think. And there's a reason why they're going out right now and trying to get 2 guys because they need 2 guys to replace him. So everyone's going to see that in the long run. And again, I think this is going to go down as an awful trade, just like the Christian McCaffrey trade. When you look back at it, was an awful decision. To give away Christian McCaffrey and Brian Burns and you didn't get a first-round pick between any of those guys is fucking insane, dude. Like crazy. And I don't blame, and I think people are, they're laughing at these people that are going off on the Panthers right now. They look like the laughing stock in the NFL right now. And they are the laughing stock. They are the worst NFL team of the last half decade. I don't think people realize that. The last half decade, 6 years, they have been the worst team in the NFL. If you look at it over the years averaged out, they're awful. So again, they hit on a first-round pick, which is really the only round they could ever hit on in the draft recently. And yet, for the last 3 hits they've had, DJ Moore, McCaffrey, and Brian Burns, they got rid of all 3 guys and didn't get a first-rounder for them. And I haven't even mentioned, and you mentioned it, Scott Fitterer is one of the worst NFL GMs in the NFL. He had a chance to get rid of Brian Burns at the peak with 2 first-rounders and a second-round pick plus a running back from LA and declined it. Oh, and mind you, the guy that's the GM right now was on board with not trading him. So I have a massive issue with that too. Dan Morgan is not off the hook either. And then to make even matters worse, they had a second opportunity to trade Brian Burns last year to get Bryce Young. And there's reports out there that the Bears inquired about Brian Burns, and the Panthers said, no, he's still off the table. And they couldn't get a deal done this past offseason. So they had 2 tries at it, fucked them both up, and also fucked over Bryce Young because he didn't have a target going into this year besides Adam Thielen, who's on, the backhand half of his career. So just this team it's laughable. I needed to rant. I needed to get out my chest because it's been pissing me off, all these trades, and I'm going to be done with it after this. But man, the Panthers, they just continue to make dumb fucking decisions. So I will leave it at that and we'll move on. But I wanted to get that off my chest. And let's go to this next trade because this had a lot of fans talking and I felt like kind of boosted the morale a little bit going back off of this Brian Burns trade. And that's right here. I mean,
yeah,
I'll give Morgan credit here. I think this is where this value was. You guys can see it on your screen. Diontae Johnson, wide receiver from Pittsburgh. They get him, and they got a 7th rounder, pick 240 for Diontae Jackson, and the Panthers' 6th round pick, which was 178. Bryson, I know you were excited about this one. Talk to me here.
Yeah, I mean, Diontae Johnson, one of the best route runners in the league, specializes in creating separation, and that's exactly what Carolina needed. I was listening to Dunk on Demand, Unnecessary Bluntness. He had Josh Norris on, and they were live when this trade broke. And Josh Norris said that Diontae Johnson would have been the number 1 wide receiver in free agency if he was a free agent, maybe just behind Calvin Ridley. So for Carolina to basically get him for nothing, for a player that they were going to cut, and a 6th round pick, I mean, that is it, to get your wide receiver 1 right now. Maybe they make another move, another trade, or get a player in the draft. But as it stands right now, Diontae Johnson is by far and away the best wide receiver on this team. To get Bryce Young a weapon with the little amount of compensation they gave away, I mean, this is one of the best trades Carolina's made in a long time in my memory. So, again, specializes in creating separation. I believe he ranked top 5 in the NFL. I think 2 seasons ago he was number 1 in the league for amount of separation per route run. So again, he's electric. He brings a little bit of attitude. Some say he's a diva. I kind of like that in my wide receivers. Somebody that's fired up, wants the ball. A lot of these wide receivers that we have currently don't do that. So maybe he brings a little bit of fire to that locker room and takes Mingo under his wing, and then whatever rookie we get, because I do think they still get a rookie early in the draft, and really kind of shows them the ropes. I think Diontae is going to be a perfect match for Bryce Young. This is exactly what he needs. Somebody that's going to get open. Bryce Young is exceptional in timing and accuracy with knowing where wide receivers are going to be on routes. Of course, it was last year was a struggle because wide receivers weren't getting open, so he had nowhere to go with the ball. And then when he had time, or when he didn't, or when wide receivers did get open and he didn't have time, he was sacked. So, they've really upgraded a lot of those areas. Diontae Johnson definitely improves the wide receiver room substantially. And I still would like to see a couple more moves in that wide receiver room, like I've said. But this is definitely a step in the right direction, in my opinion.
Yeah, they needed a wideout. It sounded like they were interested in T. Higgins. I think I saw reports, they were considering maybe bundling the 2 second-round picks they had with the Giants trading their own, which I'm glad they didn't do because Carolina needs all the picks they can get, and Dan Morgan needs to hit on every single one of them, if we're being real here, with all the holes on this team. But, yeah, I mean, to get a wide receiver for Diontae who was on his way out, he was going to be released or traded. There was no secret about that. And to flip that with, a swap of a 6th and a 7th for a guy who is a technician with separation, and that's what Carolina has struggled with mightily last year. No guys could separate from their defender whatsoever. Adam Thielen was the only one, and he was force-fed all year. So looking at it, you look ESPN Open Score. It's they judge off of separation of your wide receivers. Last year, this is of 109 wide receivers in the league. Adam Thielen was 31st. DJ Chark was 101 out of 109. And Jonathan Mingo was 108 out of 109. Diontae Johnson was 11th in the fucking league. So this guy knows how to separate. He knows how to run routes. And he's got big playability. There's numerous times where he's making one-handed catches, tiptoed on the sidelines. And I just think, the situation he was put in, I think Pickens kind of took away from him, and obviously the poor QB play in Pittsburgh. And I think this is going to be, hopefully, I would say it's a low risk, high reward type move. And if he can put it all together, I believe he had 1,000-year one time in Pittsburgh, if I got that right. So I think this is going to be really good for Bryce Young, and I think this kind of alludes, and we'll talk about this in weeks to come, who they kind of target as a wide receiver in the draft, because this guy, I think, might take some of the guys maybe people have been mocking to Carolina away, and you might get more of a bigger target for this team. But yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting because I don't think a lot of people realize that this guy would really be available. Yeah. I think it looked, from the looks of it on Twitter, Steelers fans I don't think they were expecting it at all. So, and I just want to say before, we move on here, is I did appreciate Diontae Jackson. I know a lot of people, he was either a love-hate type of guy. I thought he, had one of his best years this past season besides his rookie year. And I think, if he stays healthy, he'll probably be pretty good there in Pittsburgh. But I'll take him, man. I appreciate him, his services, and I appreciate he helped get Carolina a target for Bryce Young, because we know we all need it. So,
yeah, and real quick before we move on, just to touch on that ESPN rating. In 2022, he was number 1 in the league. In 2021, he was number 4. In 2020, he was number 3. In 2019, his rookie year, he was number 2. So he's consistently a top 10, you could even say top 5 wide receiver in the league and getting open. So to get him again for the little amount of compensation that they did, I mean, I was so excited when that alert came through. It was shocking. Like you said, not a lot of people knew he was going to be available. They turned down a trade to the Chiefs. The Chiefs tried to trade for him, and they decided not to trade him to a AFC team. So they accepted the Panthers trade, and now he is the best wide receiver in that locker room, and hopefully can help Bryce throughout his career.
All right, let's move on here. Let's go to some of the free agent signings. I believe this was the first free agent they signed, which drastic from the start of the Scott Fitterer regime, and we all know what it was. It was Cam Irving and Pat Elflein. I tweeted it out the week of free agency because it's a nightmare for all of us. And they go out and get this stud. We talked about him on the show prior. I think it was last week before free agency started. And here's the contract. It's clear they paid big money for big guards. They want massive guards up front to create that pocket and give a solid pocket to Bryce that he can step up in. I think they're trying to use the Drew Brees model of what they want out of this offensive line and what was successful for Drew Brees in New Orleans, because he was a smaller type QB. And this guy he's a mauler. I mean, he's a big ass dude, punch you in the mouth and, pancake your ass all day long. So it sounds like right guard, I'm assuming. That's what he played in Miami. And you can kind of see his numbers. We got the PFF grades up there. I mean, those numbers, I think we would have dreamed of that last year with this team. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. He's 6'6", 330. So yeah, he's a big dude. He has a last season he gave up pressures 0.8% of the time, which was number one in the NFL. Not even a full percentage point. One of the most consistent interior linemen in the NFL. He just has to stay healthy, and this is really what it costs for a guard of his caliber, and for Carolina to prioritize the money that they would have spent on Brian Burns to invest it in him and a couple other people. It really shows that they're transitioning their outlook on this team. Carolina has gone defense and kind of ridden the defense for as long as I can remember. They've kind of prioritized, having a good defense in Carolina. It looks like the mindset's changing a little bit. You spend all this money or all this capital and trading up to get Bryce Young the year prior, and he was sacked. I think was it most all time for a rookie quarterback, or maybe one or two behind?
Derek Carr was the most. He was at like 63, I think it was, or 64 this year.
Yeah, I mean, you damn near broke him in year one, but Bryce Young, resilient. I mean, did what he could throughout the year, and now you go out and you get one of the best interior offensive linemen in the NFL. It really shows that they do have a plan, and for the media to go out there, the shirt that you're wearing, I'm sure you did that on purpose, to go out there and say that you don't have any idea what Carolina's doing. I think you're just not paying attention. You're not looking close enough, and they clearly have a plan, and it's to get Bryce Young weapons and to protect him. And they took away some resources from the defense, and I'm totally fine with that because I think that should be the plan moving forward. If you invest so much money, draft capital in trading up to get Bryce Young, and you just leave him to the fucking wolves like they did last season, it's a waste of resources. You have to protect him. You have to get him weapons to really see what he's got. And I wholeheartedly believe that Bryce Young is a franchise quarterback. I think that he has everything that it takes to be a franchise quarterback. He was put in the worst situation in the NFL last year and still made plays throughout the year. Not as much as we would like to see, but unfortunately that all wasn't his fault. And we all know the reasons for that. So to get a guy that gave up one sack and a pressure rate of 0.8%, I'm sure Bryce Young appreciates that a lot. He's got his own personal bodyguard now, 6'6", 330. I wouldn't want to be lining up against him. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point this out. I talked about it last week. I just want to remind people the PFF numbers from the year prior. So that's 2023 numbers. In 2022, 24 pressures. He had 5 this past season. Yeah. 4 hits in 2022, 1 hit this year. 3 sacks in 2022, 1. And then he went from 12 penalties in 2022 to 2. So massive improvement, which you want to see. And yeah, I think it's just all scratching the surface with those two guys, and we'll talk about the other one in a minute. But I also wanted to mention this, according to Spotrac, his contract. You see the numbers there: 5 years, $100 million. It's essentially, I mean, these are the cap gurus. These are the numbers everyone goes off of. It's essentially a 3-year, $63 million contract. So and you'll notice on a lot of these contracts, at least bigger ones, Brant Tillis is left and out. This is a 3-year out basically, and the next guy we're about to talk about has got a 2-year out. So and they're lower cap hits to start, and you could see that here. We didn't get cap hits for everyone because those numbers haven't been put in yet, but you'll notice that, and you'll see a trend here with these guys, and that's the work by Brant Tillis, and that's why they brought him in. And you can tell, some of the guys they've cut. They might have dead money right now, but you look at next year and the year after, and Carolina's at, I think, in the top 10 for cap space, and I'm sure this is going to help them out greatly too. But let's talk about the next guy, because he is just as big, and clearly we already know the priority, and that's why I think it's funny. I think it was Mike Lombardi from Pat McAfee who's saying, what the hell is Carolina doing here they don't have a plan? And I get it. I have sentiment with the Brian Burns trade, but it's clear Carolina has a plan with these free agents. They wanted to get big in the trenches on both sides of the ball, and they're doing that. And I think, as I mentioned, they're trying to fit that Drew Brees model. He had massive guards in New Orleans, and that's what they're going with here. And they're going to pound the rock. That's no secret. Dave Canales has said that. So again, this guy, Damian Lewis, he's another guy we mentioned last week, and he is massive too. I don't have his measurables, but he is a big ass dude. This one, I think it's going to be decent. I don't know if he's going to wow you. I've seen some mixed things online of, his time in Seattle. I mean, there's plays where people are like, oh, he missed his block here, or oh, he held here. If he doesn't hold that, that opened up a 30, 40-yard gain. And holy shit, we got breaking news. I just want to put this out there. This isn't Carolina news, but the Chargers just traded Keenan Allen to the Bears.
Oh, wow.
Damn.
All right, there's the Bears.
I like Keenan Allen. Holy shit. I really like him. And he went to, I believe he played at UNCG. Or he played in Greensboro. Maybe not UNCG, but he played either high school ball.
High school. He went to high school.
Southwest Guilford, maybe. Was that the school?
I think so.
Yeah, he was a Greensboro product. But yeah, man, that's a good get for Chicago. I'm curious to see what he's just solid. He's just dependent, man.
What are they doing in LA? They cut both the receivers. Well, they traded Keenan Allen and they cut Mike Williams.
Fourth round pick. They got for Keenan Allen.
Carolina should have been in on that.
So Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, and they also got didn't Chicago get another guy too? I feel like they got another wide receiver in there too. I can't remember, but yeah, that's a good get for whoever's going to be under center there. I would think it's Caleb Williams at this point, but
yeah,
damn.
So yeah, back to Damian Lewis. I believe he's 6'2", 6'3", somewhere in there, 327 pounds, so around the same weight as Robert Hunt. Like you said, another big guard. They're really investing heavily. The Brian Burns contract equals both of these players. So they took the money that they could have spent on Burns and invested it in these guys to protect Bryce Young. And I can't say I disagree with what they did in that scenario. Unfortunately, they didn't get enough in return for Burns, but the contract-wise, the money that they saved from trading him, they invested in the offensive line. So that's exactly what we needed. We have depth now. I believe they're moving Corbett to center, and that worries me a little bit. But you have Christensen. I guess they're moving to swing tackle. He could be depth behind these two guards as well. I really like what they've done with the offensive line to this point. Definitely a lot better than Pat Elflein and Cameron Irving day one a couple years ago.
How comfortable are you? Give me 1 to 10. 10 being comfortable with Corbett at center.
I know he's played there a little bit. I think he played in like the preseason for the Browns. I would say maybe like a 6 right now.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I need to see it. Center's not easy. It's not an easy position, and if you're not used to it, you have to learn the ins and outs of it. So maybe he's been working this offseason to do that. Maybe he's known about this for a minute, and he's kind of been, but he is coming off some serious injuries. So you have to take that into consideration. What's your backup plan if he goes down? Because unfortunately, he has gone down. And
yeah, that's a major concern too. I mean, that's besides the inexperience there. It's, 2 massive injuries back-to-back seasons. It's a risky move, and luckily for them, this is a draft loaded with centers.
Yeah,
where they can probably get one in the second round if that's what they do, which they might. Just looking at what they've done in free agency. So that, that gives you a little bit of comfort. But again, I was talking to Josh Norris about this a little bit on Twitter. I think it's pivotal Bryce Young has a veteran center and not coming in with a rookie. Because like you mentioned, center is you have a major role on the offense with protections and changing things at the line and pointing out guys and stuff like that. So and keys and stuff like that. That's a big thing to do. And I think it's a bigger transition than people think from, college to the NFL. So, that is something I am concerned about. And I'm hoping I mean, I think they'd be dumb if they didn't go out and get a center within this draft early on, because that's a little scary, banking on Corbett.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely need to invest early in the draft in a center that can either, start day one or just learn maybe a year or two behind Corbett and take over. But Damian Lewis since 2021, this is a guy that does have history with Canales, which kind of makes me a little bit more comfortable with him. Canales knows what he is, and Canales brought him in and paid him. So, well, Dan Morgan did too, but I'm sure that they conversed with one another. But since 2021, 1,675 pass blocking snaps, 76 quarterback pressures allowed, which is a 4.53 pressure rate percentage, and then only 7 sacks since 2021. So, again, if we had that last year, we would have been saying he was probably the best offensive lineman on the team. So, maybe besides Moten. So, yeah, I mean, it is a major upgrade at the guard position still. We can't pick and choose. Beggars can't pick and choose who we get. I do believe he was still one of the best guards in free agency. So to come away with probably the best in Robert Hunt, and then top 5 or 10 guards in free agency and Damian Lewis, I think is a win for Carolina, for a team that had the worst offensive line in the league last season.
Now, I will be honest with you. I was really hoping they would have gotten also, and this was, just the icing on the cake, would have been Lloyd Cushenberry.
Yeah.
And I know that would have been like, damn, they're really not even giving Corbett and these other guys a chance. But this line, it's so hard to see it was nightmare last year, like horror movie, Final Destination 100, like fucking awful shit. And you almost want a whole, like across the board. Icky's still not. I mean, that's also a risky move, and maybe this move with Corbett, to center allows Christensen, if, the Icky project doesn't work out, you can slide him in there. And maybe that's kind of their thinking with it, because I'm not comfortable throwing Mays back there again. And, some of these other guys, like, I don't want to be dealing with that again. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how kind of that plays out with, the draft, and then obviously in training camp and in the summertime. So that'll be one to watch. But let's move on to the next one here. And this was, again, another big body, and this time on the defensive side of the ball. A'Shawn Robinson, nose tackle. He played in L.A. for some time, then he went to the Giants. 3-year deal, $22.5 million, and then a $7.3 million guaranteed. And as you can see, there's a trend here. The cap hit to start is low, and it increases over time. From what I've gathered, Bryson, I don't know what you've seen on him. I don't know a ton about him, but just from what I've seen, he is a pretty damn good defender against the run. Like him and Derek Brown in the middle. I saw one of the national, I think, reporters, good luck running on this team. And that's something Carolina has struggled with, it seems like, for a decade. Like, seriously, Carolina struggles against the run. You see it every week almost. And I think this is going to help out mightily with that and improving that this year, which is good, because Carolina, I mean, there's some pretty good running backs. Bijan comes to mind in Atlanta in the NFC South, where you need to be able to put the clamps down and force some of these teams to throw the ball a little bit. So I think this is going to be big for Derek Brown.
Yeah, and that's the point I was going to make, is that Derek Brown finally has a competent running mate beside of him. Shai Tuttle really struggled last year, so for Tuttle to be more of a rotational piece now, and Thurman to be more of a rotational piece, you have A'Shawn Robinson coming in, who is one of the better run defending tackles in the NFL. Again, you're not going to get much sacks or hurries from him. You look at the stats there on the screen, but he's good at what he does, and that's stopping the run. I think he's going to take away some double teams from Derek Brown, because you're going to have to account for both of these guys in the run game, and that's really going to help Derek Brown continue to ascend to one of the best tackles in the NFL, which he already is. He may take over that number 1 spot eventually. So, I know he has history with Ejiro Evero, and I tweeted if Ejiro Evero's coached a player before and he wants him back, I understand. I'm bought in. I like the signing because of that, because Ejiro Evero knows what he's doing. So for him to, I'm sure they again had conversation, and maybe Evero kind of pointed him towards this direction to sign Robinson, but to bring him in a position that was a need. Another nose tackle that can stop the run was definitely a need, and they did it. So I'm happy to see what Derek Brown does with someone who is a decent player beside of him.
Yeah, and I'm going to be, like I said, I don't know a ton about him. I haven't seen a lot on this guy, so I'm not going to go out there and say he's the next coming for nose tackle. But it sounds like he is a true nose tackle, and something Carolina would needed was someone to stuff the run, and that's what it sounds like this guy's going to be able to do. You obviously mentioned the Evero connection too. Let's move on to Josey Jewell. This one, I'm curious to get your take on him. I don't know how I feel about this pick. I've gotten mixed things on him, and I am sure as hell not going to do what I did last year. Like, oh my God, Carolina's going to the playoffs. They got all these greats. I remember posting it last year. I'll call myself out for it. All the wide, Thielen and Sanders, and I'm like, holy shit, this offense is going to soar. And then here we are, and we're the worst team in the NFL. So this guy I don't know a ton about, so I reached out to a buddy who's, I trust and is a Broncos fan, watches all their games, and I asked him, I'm like, I literally said, how's Josey Jewell? And he said, gets a lot of tackles, pursues the ball well, not great speed. And then I was like, well, what about in coverage? And he said, pretty average. So that is probably my biggest concern, is what he can do in coverage. And I feel like, Shaq Thompson does that at a decent, I would say. I don't think he's great in coverage, but I think he's decent. Yeah. And then he might get knocked down a notch because he's coming off a major injury too. So that, I was hoping they'd get someone who's, pretty good in coverage as well. But it sounds like, this guy is going to get, you see it this year, 60 tackles, I believe. When he was with Evero, I think he had near 100 or over 100.
He was over 100. I think it was like 123 tackles.
I think he played his best year under him. So that's promising. And some of these numbers some of these numbers are pretty damn good, but I'm not going to go out and say this guy's, an all pro next coming type thing, but I honestly would have preferred maybe a Peyton Wilson from NC State. And I know he might be available in the second round potentially. I don't know how it's so hard to read some of the mock drafts and what reality is, but who knows? Maybe this guy, is the AJ Klein of, the 2015 era. But what do you think of Jewell?
I think he's much better than AJ Klein, first of all. I do like this signing quite a bit. He's not the best coverage linebacker in the NFL, but he's not one of the worst either. He picked off Patrick Mahomes twice when they played last year. So, he's definitely, he's got his struggles every now and then in coverage, but he's really good at stopping the run as a linebacker. Since he's been in the league since 2018, played 78 games, 453 tackles, 21 tackles for loss, 9 sacks, 5 forced fumbles, 15 pass deflections, and 2 interceptions. So again, to reiterate, he had his best year in his career under Evero. I think it was like 123 tackles and a couple forced fumbles. I think that he feels a major need after you lose Luvu. Last season, their stats were very similar, and he played I think 2 less games than Luvu did. So really comes in and immediately fills in. Probably going to be one of the leaders on the defense. Maybe wearing the green sticker, who knows? But since 2021, he's had a 73.6 PFF grade, which is ranked 19th among all linebackers in the NFL. So I think, you get him at a bargain. I think 60% of the cost of what Luvu costed the Commanders. So I like it. Again, another player that has history with Evero. He wants him back. I'm on board with that. So I think he's going to be electric for this team. Again, I have a coworker, a buddy that is a Broncos fan, and he was very sad to lose Josie Jewell and said that he's going to be really good in Carolina. So I think
that.
I think we got a gem here. I'm a big fan of this, probably more than other people. I definitely more than you. But again, I kind of like those crazy white linebackers. I feel like Carolina hasn't had it for a while since maybe Luke Kuechly, and he's definitely that. So we'll see how it plays out. But again, not a big major contract. If they have to move on, then so be it. But I think he's going to be, a major piece of this defense moving forward.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hinted at it. There's a theme here with this defense. Most of the signings are all Evero guys that have played with him in the past, and you can tell they are, leaning on him to bring in his own dudes, and I think that is going to benefit. And we all know I love Evero, so I think I trust him, to have this defense playing at a high level, no matter who's on that side of the ball, because he's just that good of a coach. So. I hope you're right, and I hope this guy's, the next coming. So let's make it happen. Let's move on. Dane Jackson. This guy's got ties to Dan Morgan. Sounds like Mike Kay was reporting from the Charlotte Observer. Dan Morgan pounded the table for him a couple years ago. He was a 7th-round pick for Buffalo. Contract. These numbers have updated. And again, I apologize. I didn't check this. They're actually lower than what I had put in. It was coming in at 2 years and $14.5 million, like you see on the graphic. But actually that number now, I believe it's like 8. I think it's way lower than what I had in there initially. And of course it's not going to come up, but I think that was the number. But as you can see here, it sounds like he played more of a rotational role, started. He would be called upon to start when guys went down, things like that. But Dan Morgan clearly liked this guy and was on a mission to get him, and he lands him. What'd you think of the Jackson signing? We go from Diontae Jackson to Dane Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about him. He wasn't a major contributor in Buffalo, but I think when he played, was decent. I think he is an average cornerback too. He fills that spot opposite of J.C. Horn. The numbers for that contract are 2 years, $8.5 million with $5 million guaranteed. It's heavily incentivized to playing time, interceptions, and making the playoffs. So, if he performs, he can make up to $14 million. But if he doesn't, then it's a pretty low cap hit. And I think that they get a kind of a bargain deal for a corner that you're going to be relying on to take over that number 2 spot. He's younger, definitely still has some upside. Buffalo fans I felt like, generally speaking, that they were kind of sad to lose him, that they felt he was a pretty good player. So that's always good to see. So we'll see how he performs in more of a starting role, because I do think that he is the day one cornerback 2 opposite of J.C. Horn.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest with you. It sounds like, when called upon, he did pretty well, just from what I've been reading from Buffalo fans, but just not knowing a ton about him, that kind of scares me. There's another guy on that team that I feel like, Panther fans would have preferred Carolina to go after. And that was, Tre'Davious White, obviously. But I think Carolina was kind of strapped at what they were going to be spending, because I think they prioritized some of these other things. And I mean, we saw what Evero did with kind of this, I don't know, you call it, really a patchwork secondary last year, and had those guys playing at a decent level. So I think, they're kind of banking on that, and, Jonathan Cooley and those guys back there to get these guys playing at a high level. But I'll be curious to see if they add either another corner here in the free agency or in the draft, because I think that still that room seems a little, I don't know if weak's the right word, but I would definitely at least add another piece there just to compete.
Yeah, for sure. And we got some more breaking news. Marquise Brown signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. So
That was not as a shocker. I keep who's that guy who's calling shit online?
Pretty Ricky.
Icky Ricky, let's call him. Icky Ricky is no Pretty Ricky. Yeah, he was the one that called Hollywood Brown pretty early on, I thought.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, they get us 1 year for $11 million.
Pretty good numbers.
And what is Diontae Johnson's what, 10 mil, right?
Yeah.
Man, Carolina might have one of the best, free agent deals for a wideout in this class for free agency, which is crazy. But yeah, that'll be good for Patrick Mahomes. He's a burner. We talked about him last week. I thought he made a lot of sense for Carolina, but when you got Chiefs on your mind, you can't compete with that with being 2-15. So I don't mind him on doing that at all. And he's just, I guess he was on Baltimore, but he had his days were numbered in Arizona. So Patrick gets his weapon. But let's move on here. The signing that happened today, and I love this because the Panthers snubbed the Bears on this one, and any chance they can get to do that, I'm happy about it because I hate their fan base. But DJ Wonnum from Minnesota, give him, I would say, a pretty, it looks like a pretty cheap deal. 2 years, $12.5 million. Everyone's going to go to the sacks and compare him to Brian Burns. He's probably seen about 1 million times on Twitter at this point. He did have 8 sacks this past season. Brian Burns, we know, had 8 sacks this past season. He had 38 pressures, won them, 6 hits, 23 hurries. He had a pretty solid year. But you really got to go look at those sacks, and Josh Norris pointed this out today. If you guys don't follow him, give him a follow. He's great on Twitter. But 3 of his sacks were like no one in front of him, coming right at the quarterback unblocked. Like, you could have made the sack. Seriously. So that's just got to take that, and that's what everyone's going to point at. They're going to point at the 8 and be like, oh, you got 12.5. You're paying this guy 12.5. Brian Burns is getting 140 in New York. But I don't mind the signing. He's young. I think he's like 26, 27. It's a cheap deal. He had a decent season last year. I think he had some injuries. I think all 3 of the guys they're looking at, we'll talk about the other 3 in a little bit here, but he's had some injury history. But he's been pretty solid these last few seasons. What are your thoughts on Wonnum, Bryson?
Yeah, I would not consider him a Brian Burns replacement. Again, when you talk about just box score watching, yeah, they both had 8 sacks, but DJ Wonnum for the whole season of 2023 was charted at 3rd or 4th worst in pass rush win rate amongst edge rushers. Brian Burns was 6th best. So he played in a defense with Brian Flores that blitzed like the highest amount in the league percentage-wise.
Yeah, crazy blitz.
So, of course, like you mentioned, he had those 3 sacks that were just easy sacks. If Burns was in that defense, his numbers probably would have been inflated as well, much higher than 8 sacks. So, I think you got to take it with a grain of salt. This is definitely a.
And he had Daniil Hunter. On the other side, the guy had 16 sacks this past year, just dominant.
Yeah, so this is definitely more of a YGM replacement and not a Brian Burns replacement, in my opinion. I think they're still searching for that Brian Burns replacement, and we'll get into it in a little bit. But yeah, this is definitely not the quote unquote, I think David Newton said it, Brian Burns replacement. It's just not. While if you look at the box scores, they're very similar stats wise. When you break it down and you look at the defense and you look at the win rate on the edge, Wonnum was actually not that great last year. He played in a defense that really helped him get those numbers. So hopefully he continues to grow. He is 26 years old, like you said, and maybe Evero kind of evolves his defense into more of a Brian Flores style defense with the lack of talent that they have currently, really, on all phases of the ball in defense. They've lost quite a bit, so we'll see what happens. YGM replacement, not Brian Burns replacement.
Thank you for pointing that out because people eat that stuff up online when they see the numbers. And going back to the injuries, I don't know what injuries he's had, but he's kind of had every other year, which kind of is alarming to me because his first year in the league, he played 2 games, had 3 sacks. 2021, played almost the whole season, 14, had 8 sacks. Then in 2022, played 1 game, so he had an injury, had 4 sacks. This past year, played majority of the year, 14 games again, had 8 sacks. So it's like 3, 8, 4, 8. So is this year going to be 2? Like, that's my concern. Like, the trend you see, it goes, and that's a lot of these guys, and we'll talk about them here in 2 seconds, of there's just not consistency across the board. And obviously, he'd be making more money if it was. But
Yeah.
that's what Carolina can hopefully try to figure out and hit on. And, maybe he's got, back-to-back seasons where he's getting that because there is inconsistency there. So people, I think, need to realize that they're not, it's not like that every year. So that's what happens when you're going out. And that's when you don't have a Brian Burns, you're not going to get a consistent guy. I mean, the guy has had 8 sacks or more every single year since his rookie year. I think he had 7. So, yeah, I mean, that's just kind of where they're at. But they're trying to make an effort to kind of replenish that, because they did lose YGM. That was one that, and we'll talk about some of the other guys they lost, but YGM was one of them. Crazy to think fans wanted YGM back after in the summer, everyone was like, he might not make the team.
Yeah.
And then he had this breakout year, and of course he goes off to San Fran. So, yeah, Carolina, I think you hit it, nailed it on the head. Me and Edgar were tweeting about it this afternoon too. I think he's the YGM replacement. That's who this guy is going to be. And it sounds like, he's had better production than YGM. So that could, that's probably an improvement there. But here's some of these other guys they're looking at. And obviously one of them was, signed. So that one's in the books. But they had, sounds like Jadeveon Clowney was in this evening. They had Chase Young in today or yesterday. Reports are all over the place, so I don't know. But it sounds like they had all 3 of those guys in today. And then they got Jordan Fuller coming in, I think, tomorrow. He's a safety for LA and has ties to Evero. So, Bryson, you talked about it. You said you don't think, DJ's the quote-unquote Brian Burns replacement. So out of Young and Clowney, who do you prefer as the Burns replacement, if that's what you want to call it?
Yeah. I think they both have concerns when it comes to injuries. Clowney's definitely age concern, and he's coming out of a defense in Baltimore that was really productive for defensive linemen. It was one of the best defenses in the league, so he had that going for him. I think he did kind of have a career resurrection in Baltimore, but again, I think he was playing under Mike McDaniel in a defense that really allowed him to do that because there was talent surrounding him. Chase Young, former number 1 overall pick, significant knee injury and just hasn't been the same since. I think both of them were ranked in the top 10 in pass rush win rate last year. I think I would rather go Chase Young just because of the age, and you kind of hope that he gets back to that talent level that he has. But there are questions about his motivation for football. If he really, has that motor that keeps him going every play. You kind of didn't really hear much about him when he went to San Francisco. I think he had a decent Super Bowl, but it's just a guy like, is he just going to disappear when, throughout the season when DJ Wanham and Chase Young aren't performing to the ability that we want them to? So it's really hard to pick between the two, but I think if I could choose one, I think I would go with Young, just solely based off of his age and just hoping and praying that he gets back to that level that allowed him to be the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I'm really torn. I was looking at their numbers and what I've seen from them, just watching highlights and games of theirs both, and I think the easiest way I could put it today was I think Clowney is going to give you your biggest impact now off the jump. It's the way I think I put it on Twitter. But I think Young is young and gives you value long term, and also the his potential is like could be crazy. Like Brian Burns numbers consistently.
Yeah.
If you can get that and tap back into that, pre-injury. So I'm torn. I kind of would like also a veteran in that edge room because it is a young room, and even the guy they signed today, Wanham, he's younger, so I think Clowney could add some value there to a guy like DJ Johnson. So I'm almost leaning more Clowney than Young, but I like it's to the point it's almost like a coin flip for me.
Yeah.
And if they either guy they get, I'm gonna be. I mean, I think they need to get one of them. Like I don't think they can just go in with one of them. So, but I'm kind of leaning Clowney for that reason, just the veteran leadership, and I think he could play. Maybe I would think 2 years, probably 2 or 3 more years. I mean, he is kind of young. He's not young, but he's only 31. And some of these edge guys they can play late in their 30s. So I don't know. I think he's still got a couple years left, value in him. So, but like you said, both guys are just not consistency there. I agree. I think Baltimore's defense, that coaching staff, the players on that team in Baltimore helped him out mightily. But yeah, I think just with his leadership, I think that would add a lot of value for this team as well. So I would probably lean Clowney if I had to pick one. But I don't think you could go wrong with either of them. And I think they need to get one of them. And I thought you said it perfectly tonight on Twitter. It's reported that Clowney's going to be visiting the Jets next week. If Carolina lets him out the door tonight, I don't think they're getting him.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I think if let's just be realistic. Clowney is getting up there in age. He's 31, but still, how many years of solid production does he have left? When you're looking at different situations, with the Jets, who if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, they're legitimate playoff contenders, and Clowney can go in there, fill Bryce Huff's spot that they lost in New York, and kind of, be pretty much guaranteed a playoff spot if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, or he can come to Carolina back home and kind of help build this team back up. He really has to weigh that. Money, I'm sure, plays a part, but yeah, I think Chase Young's only 24, so he's still got significant time to grow and kind of progress back from that injury and still learn in the NFL. So I think both are. I agree. It's like a coin flip for me too. I would be happy with either. They do need to sign one of them though. Like you cannot go into the NFL draft with DJ Wanham and a question mark, and count on a rookie to give you that production that you lost from Brian Burns. So it definitely should be a priority, which I do think it is. Bringing them both in for visits, a priority to sign one of the two.
Well, and I forgot about this. I mean, he has been in the league for what? 9 years, so this will be his 10th year this upcoming season. Clowney, he did have one season in Seattle that I remember it now, looking at it. But so there is a tie there to Canales' staff. In 2019, he was there. So, and I'm on it. I was shocked that he even wanted to come visit here, and that might just be to boost. He's not getting much out there right now and wants more money, but.
Yeah.
I was surprised to see that because, he is from the Rock Hill area and would like to come, maybe come back home and probably retire after this stint. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think they need to go out and get one of these guys. What about Jordan Fuller? Any thoughts on him?
I mean, I don't know a whole lot about him. I know he has ties to Everett, like you mentioned. I think he's a solid safety. He's got that captain patch on there. So, probably a good locker room leader. I think he's been pretty average safety, to above average in some areas. So of course they have a hole there, cutting Von Bell, which was kind of crazy, caught me off guard. But I'm a big Cam Curl fan from Washington, much younger, top 10 statistically in a lot of areas, good in zone and man. was top in the league of tackles for safeties. But again, I don't know how much money he's going to cost. Jordan Fuller probably a little cheaper. But I do think Fuller would be a great addition to the defense. Opposite of Xavier Woods, somebody who's familiar with the system, who can continue to help, teach the other players on this team that Evero system that is hard to learn and it is extensive. And, bringing in guys like Jewell and Fuller potentially and, other people that have connections, Troy Hill, who's been there, who played real well last season, I think can only help that defense that's lost a lot of talent.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think this deal is pretty much locked up. Like, I'd be shocked if this guy doesn't sign tomorrow. He's coming in. Looking at his stats, I don't know. I have not seen this guy play at all. I did not know him beyond this week, to be totally honest with you. But just looking at his stats, 94 tackles this past year, 3 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, 3 forced fumbles. Like, that's damn good numbers.
Yeah.
And so that kind of excites you. And it sounds like, he played pretty well under when Evero was there in LA. So I think he's kind of underrated from what it sounds like, and he's not going to fetch a lot of money. I thought maybe, Justin Simmons would be the obvious one, but it sounds like he wants to get paid heavily. But maybe his market is kind of going down a little bit because, he hasn't been signed yet. So maybe that's even a possibility in the long run. But I think realistically, I think Fuller is going to probably get a deal done tomorrow, I would think. And again, another Evero guy. That's the theme here with this defense is they're going to go out and get guys. And like you said, I think this is another guy that knows his system and can kind of teach it to the other guys in the room. And one thing Carolina hasn't had is, a second year DC for some of these players. So, they can kind of build off of what they did last year. So yeah, let's leave it there. I do want to mention some guys that they lost quickly because, there's a couple. Frankie Louvu, you mentioned him, goes to Washington. It sounds like Carolina offered him more money from reports than the Commanders did, but he wanted to go to a team where he was going to be utilized more as a blitzer. And we know Frankie Louvu was really good at that. I believe a season or two ago, he had 7 or 8 sacks on the year. And, we know he flies around the field. I'm kind of disappointed they couldn't keep him, with the Burns loss. And then this one was just a double whammy for me, at least, of, a guy who I felt like Carolina kind of brought him into the league almost, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, he had flashes with New York, and New York fans were sad that he was gone, but he really built, what he was as a player in Carolina. So I really wish they would have been able to lock him up, and it just sounds like he thought Dan Quinn's defense was a better fit for him than Evero's. So that's kind of unfortunate. And then Jeremy Chin, the guy, and that's the one Mike Lombardi mentioned is, what the hell are they doing? And clearly Lumbo, as they want, Lumbo, they like to call him. Guy didn't watch a lick of Panthers football because Jeremy Chin was never on the field. So, but your thoughts on some of the guys they lost, Bryson? YGM, another one.
YGM, Von Bell. I think that they kind of what Dave Canales said was when he came in that he's happy that he doesn't really have a connection here because he doesn't have that personal connection with players where feelings are involved. They just they don't think you're a good fit, they're moving on, and that's what they did with a lot of guys. And it does sound like they tried to get Louvu back, but I feel like his replacement that they signed is a good one in Josie Jewell. I am high on him, like we talked about earlier. Still got to address losing Brian Burns. Still got to address losing Von Bell. You got the YGM replacement, but those are some major holes. Diontae Jackson, they brought in Dane Jackson. Is that the cornerback too? I think so, but maybe they don't. Maybe they're planning on drafting one early in the draft or signing another guy, one of these vets that are out there right now. Gilmore still available, I believe. Maybe he returns back, but again, a lot of holes left, especially on the defensive side. And we'll see how free agency progresses.
Yeah, and then a couple of guys they kept of their own that we want to do mention as well is Troy Hill. We're glad they brought him back. That was one guy we mentioned. If you're going to get rid of Diontae, you better bring him back. He was their nickel corner this past year. Going back quickly just to Dane Jackson, I'm wondering if he's going to be more of the C.J. Henderson role that he played this past year. I don't know. I still feel like there's just a hole there. I just don't know a lot about this Dane guy, but I could really see them going corner too at some point in this draft. But yeah, Troy Hill's a guy they signed. I'm glad they brought him back because he had a pretty good year. He is a veteran in the room too. And then you got Amir Smith-Marset, who I'm excited they brought back. And I get it. You really shouldn't be excited about Panthers receivers of last year. But this is a guy I thought that flashed at times. He's a really good returner. And just for that return value, they should have brought him back. And I still think he should get more opportunities in the receiving room too, because I felt like there were times where he got open and made some plays too. So yeah, I'm happy about both of those guys that they brought back. Ricci, we all know I liked him. He's gone. I think he signed with Cleveland, going back home there. And let's talk about that quick too. The tight end room. I mean, this room, I am not happy with this room. I know you like your guy Tremble, and I do too. I think he's got some value from what he did last year. But like this room has not had like a 300, 400 yard receiving tight end in like years. And it's 300 yards is nothing. Yeah. Like that's Tremble had like 100 and some yards last year. I was shocked when I looked that up the other day. I'm like, I feel like he had more than that. But like this tight end room, they can't continue to keep the same goddamn room, and it's terrible. It makes no sense to me at all. And here we are sitting again. Ian Thomas has withstood like every regime. I mean, he's withstood the Dom Capers fucking regime in the 90s. Like, what is going on here? Like, man, I mean, he's got dirt. He has to have dirt on someone because this guy keeps, and God forbid if we see a fucking Ian Thomas screen this year, I'm going to lose it. So, I mean, that guy needs to go. I can't believe he's still on the team. But this tight end room, and the draft, it's not a loaded tight end draft this year at all. I mean, last year would have been the year to do it if they were going to go and get someone. This year, it's kind of slim pickings. And then we watched at the start of free agency, was shocked about every single Seattle tight end not going to Carolina, which was weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, I really want to know if I think I mentioned him, a couple episodes ago. Yeah, that room needs help. I do like Tremble a lot. I think he's going to continue to grow into probably the best tight end in that room. Well, he is the best tight end in that room, but he'll continue to grow into a better tight end in the league. Sullivan's got his, positives about him. He flashed last season as well. At points, I thought he was the best receiving threat on the team, jump ball wise at least. And then, of course, Ian Thomas, we all know, like you mentioned, sick and tired of him. Don't want to see him on the field at all. He's, everybody says he's this great blocking tight end, which he can be, but other times he's completely lost and doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He looks like a blind man on the field. So, but yeah, another player you didn't mention that returned back that I'm a fan of, Raheem Blackshear. They did bring him back as well. I'm a big fan of his. I thought that he had a chance to be running back 2 on this team. I do think that if he gets more opportunities, he will kind of ascend through that running back room. I think he's better than Miles Sanders, without a doubt, in my opinion. And I think that he could compete with Chuba if he's given those opportunities. But yeah, they brought him back. ISM, I love. Big fan of ISM. He didn't really get a lot of opportunity until the end of the year after Frank was fired, and that's when he really came on. Those end arounds. He was really one of the only bright spots on that offense to help Bryce Young. And he's continuing to grow, younger guy in the league. Learning, the route tree more. I think that he will get more opportunities in that wide receiver room, and he will, fulfill those in a positive way. So I really like bringing him back as well.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Again, I'm sure we're going to see more deals come in the next coming days, and into next week. But we just want to thank everyone for tuning into the Panthers on Tap podcast. You can catch our episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Go give us a follow on Twitter at Panthers on Tap for all your analysis and breaking news. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Again, we're still doing that jersey giveaway once we hit 500 subscribers. Panthers jersey of your choice. Check it out. And as always,